So we are starting into content one, chapter one. The nice thing about this content area is it covers all of chapter one, so it's actually a fairly small content area. So we're talking about the prehistoric ages or the lithic periods slash Stone Age. Um, what you must understand is that art and lives of the early people have to do with what they are most concerned with. So these prehistoric people would be concerned with what? They have no housing, they have no stores, nothing to buy their food or anything like that from. So their biggest concerns are food, reproducing, and just life in general, staying alive. So climate changes make all the difference in what art is produced and what's happening during this period. Much of the art is viewed as being developed from simple to complex, much like a child. You know, you start from the beginning and then you progress until things get more complicated. However, what people don't understand is that art of this period wasn't so much that it was simple or childlike, but it was more representational. Wasn't that these these early people, were not capable of producing, say, Renaissance style art, but it was stylized. It wasn't super important to them. So, what we find is basically prehistory refers to before written word. When we talk prehistory, we mean before written word, before history was beginning to be acknowledged and written down. Before the written word, early humans had images to show expression. Art traveled the path generally through human migration. We watched this video here in class before you've seen this PowerPoint. Much of human migration had to do with geological climate changes. These human expressions of art were influenced by the changing environment and daily life. So, more art's produced whenever there's a boom in food. Art changes because of these settlements and settlementations. There are three periods of global prehistory that we're going to talk about. We've got the Paleolithic or the Old Age, which is generally, and you're going to see these dates varied, so they're not incredibly important, but this just gives you an overview. But the Paleolithic period begins between 40,000 to 10,000 BCE. The Mesolithic period is between 9,000 and 8,000 BCE, and then we've got the Neolithic, which is 7,000 to 2,300 BCE. Again, these dates will vary depending on who or what resources you look at. But key thing, Paleolithic, Mesolithic or Middle Stone Age, Neolithic or New Stone Age. We know from our reading and from history that humankind originated in Africa and then extended out. So we see a lot of early African or early arts. I think the earliest one was a little pebble that they found that had a face on it. And that was found in Africa, I believe 30,000, 3 million BCE. Woo-woo. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about is the Apollo 11 cave. This is one of your artifacts. Excuse me. Again, remember that early art began as representational and abstract. The majority of early art was used as a functional or with an unknown purpose. So it needed to have function for these people. Even the unknown purpose typically was some sort of ritualistic or religious, I guess, if you want to say that these early people had religion aspects. So when we talk about unknown purpose, it's usually ritualistic or symbolic. Throughout these early civilizations, Apollo 11 cave was found in 1969. There were 7 fragments of stone which had paintings of unrecognizable animals on it. Some of you might be some of them are kind of recognizable. You see spots on some, big blobs on others. But the only one with definite characteristics was a one that had stripes. Now, these stones are interesting. It's charcoal on stone. What's interesting about it, is that it's the first form of portable art. So think of it as you're carrying around a canvas. Usually most artworks in this era were static. They were not able to move, obviously. Then we're going to move to the Lussig's Cave. A word to know, or a phrase to know on this is twisted perspective, which basically what twisted perspective means is that when the head is turned one direction and the body's twisted into another. So the head might be in a full frontal position and the body is turned into a profile. We'll continue to talk about this. Early forms of people were also muralists. Hopefully everybody kind of knows what that is. It should be pretty self-explanatory. A muralist basically paints on the wall of the cave, or in this case, the cave. So this is the oldest and most famous cave. Most of these caves are found in the south of France and in Spain. This dates about 17,000 years ago, between 16,000 and 14,000, or as our tag says here, 15 to 13,000 BCE. Many cave paintings were originally created, then added onto over thousands of years of civilization. So a lot of these paintings, some aspects of it may be much older than other aspects because people have just continued to add to it over the age. As you go back deeper into this cave, they do become older. Another thing to note about the Lussig's Cave is it is extremely deep, so there wouldn't be any light in there for these people to create these paintings, so they had to have some type of light source as they were doing this. Excuse me. This image here is called the Hall of the Bulls. It's the main chamber of the Lussig's Cave. Paintings stretch throughout the cave, again, where there was absolutely no light. Why do you think early people painted these walls? Well, some historians say that it's merely decorative. However, others say it had a ritualistic purpose. So maybe they, like a teaching, possibly it was a teaching mechanism where they would bring the young in and teach them how to hunt, or stories of the past, excuse me, to teach lessons. Bulls and horses were not the diet of primitive people, so historians don't necessarily believe that it was because it was their food source, but it could be what they saw most of the time. So again, that's why it shows you teaching or ritualistic purposes. I say historians because due to the fact that this is prehistory, nobody really fully knows, but they can make very educated guesses, informed observations, and carbon dating really does help with this too. So cave paintings, like the ones in Lussig's, have helped historians learn a great deal of early human life. They are written pictures. These are their documentations of their histories. Much of this is done in charcoal and clay, like red dirt. If you see those red dirt roads, that kind of thing. The Lussig's paintings were among the largest amount and biggest paintings. The paintings are silhouettes and outlines, so we see both there. Early paintings and drawings. Many of these caves are a few hundred years, if not a few hundred to several thousand feet long. They're incredibly huge caves. Prehistoric drawings consisted of charcoal, which again is burnt wood, red, yellow ochre, which is kind of an earthy material made of ferric oxide, typically clayish. Any of you chemists in there might really enjoy that. A lot of art is chemistry, science, mathematics. It really does tie in with everything. Prehistoric drawings I already said that. I'm sorry. How they made their paints. So this is how they made their paints. They had brushes, which were typically made out of reeds, twigs. They would put the tips on the end, the bristles or hair, or use blowpipes. Like they'd hollow out a stick or a twig, and then they would blow their pigment through them. We would call it pigment. You do see holes in the sides of many of these. I'm trying to look in this. It's kind of hard to tell here, but you will see holes drilled into the side of many of these caves. Historians believe that this is for scaffolding because many of these are very large. So early humans, it shows signs that they've used structures and tools like scaffolding to paint these. The theories are they, again, mere decoration. Many paintings are inaccessible. So that kind of leads them to believe that it's kind of the early humans believed that by painting these, it was magical. It kept the beasts under control. So it would keep their food source under control, or disasters because of these animals under control by painting them. Again, teaching tools, it's survival of the herd or animals as deities. So they thought possibly that these early humans thought of them as deities or gods. This is Altamira in Spain. Then we have Pech Mural here. This is, again, not one of your artifacts. However, it gives you a good perspective on how large some of these are. Again, think about this. These are thousands upon thousands and thousands of years old, but look how dark it still is. Look how great they still look. It's not so much that they're not realistic. We talked about that. Not realistic at all, but they're very stylized and symbolic. So early humans are using stylized techniques to tell a story, kind of like modern art does. It's very interesting. The interesting thing about Pech Mural is the use of negative space. We finally see handprints that they've used some blowing tool to blow the pigment around it, so it's a silhouette of the hand. That shows, it tells historians that humans are present. So by slapping that handprint on there, it's either a signature of the artist or that they're showing human presence. You also see dots around these animals. Again, they believe it's showing human presence. Relief and carvings. So these are megalithic sculptures. This one to the left here is a megalithic sculpture, which basically means a very large stone sculpture that's not movable. So no matter the theories, we know for certain that these paintings, sorry, I think I skipped one. All right, so in this work, we've got a large bison sculpture. Again, it's considered a megalithic sculpture. And then to the right, we've got that twisted perspective. They believed that this was some type of spearhead. The bison is a fragment of the spear thrower made of ivory. It's made of ivory, which is a fairly tough material. It's very detailed, and it's licking its hind flank. So we're seeing here artistic developments between this style of cave painting and this structure or sculpture. This over here, this megalithic sculpture, is considered to be an incised sculpture, meaning they've carved it out of the stone behind. Now, there is evidence that they've also used some type of clay material in order to build up pieces that they've needed as well. It's considered a relief sculpture. So basically you would take a tool called a burin, and you would incise out of the stone to create a relief sculpture. A relief sculpture is something that comes out or stands out at you. Okay, how did prehistoric humans choose their subjects? We kind of already touched on this. Think about that. Write that down. How did they choose their subjects? What was the importance of it? Did they just do it because of aesthetic purposes, or were they doing it because of other reasons? So we've got here the Holstein Seidel, which is made of, sorry, I'm trying to find it right there. Holstein Seidel, which was found in Germany, and it's made of mammoth tusk. It's the first intricately developed carving found. It's 1 foot tall, which is very large for this era. Shows a significant development in the human brain. If you look, it's called a oh doop doop doop. Sorry guys, I lost my place here. Okay, scratch that. It's 1 foot tall. Shows a significant development in the human brain. Um, Basically it's a man or a person with a feline face, so it's considered anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic means half human, half person. We're going to see that a lot in Egyptian time, as well as ancient Mediterranean, well, and throughout history from here on out. Why do you think we've got the Venus of Willendorf here? So they believe that these were definitely all ritualistic. We've got the Venus of Willendorf here. Now, my college professor that taught art history to me actually wrote an incredibly interesting article on this. He has a theory of what these are. I definitely encourage you to read his article. I will give it to you in class, or I will have it up on Classroom. Excuse me, for you to view. So right here, the Venus of Willendorf and the woman holding the bison horn are portrayed with exaggerated human forms. Why do we think that happens? Well, exaggerated human forms, remember the things that were important to them: food, reproduction, and housing and that sort of thing. So basically, staying alive. If I had the music, I would play Staying Alive right now, but I don't. So what you typically see, it's a lot of early forms of art are women, and you see an exaggerated genitalia. So this area here, you see so the areas that make women what they are and their benefit to society, you typically do not see any sort of facial structure. Here, obviously, it's broken, it's damaged. But if you look at the Venus of Willendorf, her whole face they think it's either a cap or her hair. So it's basically a non-specific or very stylistic sculpture, and it used in ritual because of the exaggerated genitalia. Okay. So what we're looking at here is the Shavu Cave, 30,000 to 28,000 BCE, or sorry, I wonder why I have two different dates there. I will let you know in class. So this cave was discovered in 1994, threw historians for a loop. Carbon dating dated it as early as 30,000 BCE, thousands of years older than any other cave. So they had believed initially that cave paintings started at a specific point because of human development, but then this cave comes along and it throws people way off. What's throwing them off is the time period which it was created, which they didn't think that had started yet, and the details in which it is shown. So if we look back here at Pechmural, at Altamira, see, look at those caves compared to Holy Toledo. Look at this one. We're starting to see, instead of two horns, again, a more stylized approach. This bison here, or this bull, is facing in a profile view, but you see both horns. They're becoming slightly more realistic because you see one. Whoop, right there. You're seeing one. Also, much more realistic detail are happening. So the carbon dating dates as early as 30,000 BCE. It made them reevaluate stylistic development or cognitive development in early humans. It's not a twisted perspective, but in very natural perspective. We've got rhinoceroses fighting. Art is telling a narrative. It's telling a story, and it's very apparent in this. It killed the idea that Paleolithic art evolved from simple to complex. Okay, so we're into Paleolithic era. A lot of this had to do with human migration. Humans definitely, when they begin to settle down in the Paleolithic area, they congregate around what do you think? Water. Woo woo. So, oops, sorry. I think I skipped. There we go. I completely missed several slides here, so we're going to keep going. Sorry, my printout didn't work very well. All right. So we go from early paintings or Paleolithic. All of this is Paleolithic era. Now we're coming into Neolithic. Okay. So Mesolithic and Neolithic. Again, Mesolithic means Middle Age or Middle Stone Age. Lithic meaning stone. Neolithic is New Stone Age periods. So around 9000 BCE, the ice began to melt, sea levels began to rise, and England separated from Europe and Spain from Africa. So all of these things are happening. We've got here, you can see here, which is either trapping people on certain continents or they're making them, basically the earth is beginning to be less treacherous, less barren. It grows more things. It's not as non-fertile as it once was. So in the Paleolithic, we have hunters and gatherers, thus the cave paintings, lots of migration, lots of tools. We've got the Mesolithic period, which is, again, the Middle Age. There are more gatherers, and we see the coming of a domesticated dog. So if you look over here at this image, this is like a Mesolithic image, more teepees, that sort of things. They move around, huts like that. Then in the Neolithic, they are really starting to put down a city. We've got cultivation, we've got farming, we've got livestock. People are thriving. The life expectancy is beginning to be later. So here we are, Neolithic world. Hello. So this here is the oldest known temple. Again, people are staying put. They're static, so we're seeing more carvings and buildings. Okay. We've got Jericho, 8000 to 7000 BCE. It's built while it's considered dry masonry, which means they basically just stacked on top blocks or masonry on top of each other without using any sort of mortar. This is one of the first, believed to be one of the first large city settlements that they've uncovered anyway. And all of this is beginning to help us come into that, the next chapter, the next content area, the ancient Near East. So we're looking here, we're seeing big eyes beginning to start. It's still very stylized. We're looking at ritualistic burials, especially back here with the Globekul Tepe, oldest known temple, done for ritualistic purposes. These little guys here were buried. It was kind of the start. They were buried with dead. It was the start of large-scale sculpture, 3 feet tall. So this would be, for this age, considered large-scale sculpture. Kind of creepy, huh? Okay, Catalhoik. We've got, like that, right? We've got first images of human hunters here. We've got first ever large landscape paintings. So this is supposed to be, at Catalhoik, this is supposed to be mountains, cities, representational paintings. So what we're seeing here is European megaliths. So we've gone all the way from Catalhoik, kind of around Syria, that area, And we're coming up here to European megaliths. This is called Newgrange. They believe this was a burial site or an ancient tomb. You see these swirling patterns everywhere. This is also copied in what we would call later Stonehenge. They're big megaliths. This is a huge burial mound. We're seeing this megalith again. The structures that we're beginning to see are finally becoming coined or phrased. We've got an apse or an apsis. This structure or this technique here in architecture is continued throughout now. And then we have post, oh goodness, we have post and lintel construction as well. So we've got post, pretty simple one, post, lintel, yeah. So again, European megaliths, Stonehenge, 2550 to 1600 BCE. These circular constructions are throughout Europe. They're called triliths, which basically post, lintel, trilith, there's three. Because these are done in a circular pattern, they are considered a hinge. They call them a hinge. Now, if you look up here in the aerial view, you see the hinge in the middle, but it's also surrounded by other circular patterns. Historians believe that these were used as ritual purposes and to mark the season. We have a capstone in here. I believe it would probably have been about here. Oh, right there, altar, capstone. So this altar here, it marks an important day on the calendar. I believe it's the winter solstice. So it's also believed to be used as a calendar as well, or important because that it marks a certain point. So we move to central Mexico now. I know we're jumping all the way around the globe, but bear with me, okay? It's a succession and notable things. So central Mexico, 14,000 to 7,000 BCE, the Cameliid Sacrum. A camelid is a member of the, let me say this word, ready? Camelidae family. Think camels, okay? Think llamas, thanks alpacas, okay? So that's where this Cameliid sacrum head came from. The sacrum is a large triangular, the sacrum is the large triangle bone at the base of the spine. Holes were cut into the end of the bone to represent nostrils, and the bone is also engraved. So that's what makes this so important and so notable. Is it was found, I believe, by a Mexican farmer, but this isn't necessarily what it looked like. It has been manipulated and carved, they believe, for, again, ritualistic purposes. We'll learn more about this because, again, this is one of our artifacts. So, where am I? There we are. So an engineer, a farmer engineer, found it while working on a drain pipe in 1870. The dates are not clear because it was in someone's private collection for a long time. The sacrum bone was believed to be a portal to another universe. That's what early people believed it was in Mexico or in this area. The original function is fully unknown, but they believe that possibly that is, that would be the reason. Rituals. It may have been used as by a shaman, again, because they believe that sacrum bone is a connection between the ritual or the another universe. So they believe possibly spiritual by a shaman. Okay. So the founder of many African rock paintings in the area of, we've got the Horned Woman here. This is the running Horned Woman. We've got kind of that twisted perspective. She's got many more symbolic things happening to her. So the founder of many African rock paintings in the area of the Horned Woman believed that it was influenced by the Egyptians. So a lot of these historians believe that this was, it was influenced by Egyptians. If you look at her, you can tell that why they might have thought that. Look at the feet, look at the twisted kind of perspective that's happening here. that what your prior knowledge tells you is Egyptian art. Um, but those claims have since kind of been disproven. But that's what they originally thought. Um, the Tassili Plateau, hailed as the greatest center of prehistoric art in the world. A lot of artifacts were found in the area where the Horned Woman was found in Algeria. Um, we've got rock art as images carved, drawn, or painted into immovable rock surfaces. Images that are carved and engraved into rock are called petroglyphs. Images with paint or other pigment are called pictographs. Okay, two different terms there. Beaker with ibex motif. These pots in this area, the area that this ibex motif was found in, were made and buried with the dead. So these were, again, ritualistic beakers. Possibly made on a slow wheel or hand built. Again, many things are hand built, but the potter's wheel was invented by this time. It was just slow, considered the slow wheel. Ha ha ha. The images on the beaker are not naturalistic, but geometric and stylized. Obviously, it does not look like that, right? An animal doesn't look like that. The design in the middle of the horns of the goat could have belonged to the family who owned it. So we see this big goat, right? Big horns, very stylized, very geometric. They believe that this is possibly the seal, if you will, or the family crest of the family which it was buried with. And again, an ibex is a horned goat. Anthropomorphic stele. We're going to talk about steles here for a while in much of this ancient art, like the Near Eastern art and things like that. So this is an upright stone slab or column, typically bearing a commemorative inscription or relief design, often serving as a gravestone. Steles typically serve as a gravestone or a grave marker. Anthropomorphic meaning having human characteristics. What we see here. This is 3 feet tall. There were multiple of this style of stele found, which are almost identical. However, so they found a lot of these. They were very close to being identical. However, they were each found separately in very far-reaching territories. So, again, the only way these people had to travel was to walk or by animal. So it's funny that the influence that, oh my gosh, we found this here, and then thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away, we find very similar things. So we're seeing the influence of things with migration, travel, and with trade routes happening. The Arabian Peninsula was savanna then instead of desert, and so the Arabian Peninsula where this was found was a savanna then instead of the desert and that we see now. And most likely they believe that this, instead of being so much trade, that it traveled more by word of mouth, by people while trading and moving. Yeah. The jade Kong. So jade is a stone, obviously. A Kong, these were found in China. We'll learn about this when we go in through the Asian unit. Excuse me. But to carve jade is extremely hard because jade it's a very hard surface. All they had to use to carve this was usually string and sand. So they would rub sands on it and use string to incise these marks here. And it was a very, very, very long process. We'll talk about what a Kong is more later, and this is one of your artifacts, so we will talk about it more this week. So Kong is basically a tube with square cross sections and a circular hole. They were typically different for each family, if not each person. There is a face pattern that we see on this in the circles. So we see our circles here. And there's a very stylized face pattern happening there. The stacks are anthropomorphic and bestial figures which may refer to deities. So the carvings here are saying they're anthropomorphic and beastly, showing that it's possibly some sort of religious or deity that's happening. So we've already talked about how hard this jade is. The round interior and the round structure is believed to represent the study of the universe. So everything happening in circles. And if any of you know anything about Chinese history and Chinese religion especially, it's very much celestial, I guess. I hope I don't offend anybody with that word. But it's very much universal, like the pull and the power of the earth and what happens in the change of seasons and that sort of thing. Again, we'll get into that a lot when we get into the Asian culture. The Ambam stone. So this was found in Papua New Guinea, South Pacific Islands. So we're, again, bouncing around. So the significance and function of this Ambam stone kind of remains pretty obscure. As little is known about the people who produced this work. Such objects are often considered sacred and created with supernatural powers by present-day people in the religion. So the people that live in the area at this time believed that these were made to hold and still hold supernatural powers. Possibly used as spirit stones in sorcery and other rituals. Could have been a mortar and pestle as well. It's not as interesting, but they believe this guy was an anteater. But hey, maybe it was just to grind up some salt. You never know. Yeah. Caltico female figurines. There is a nice video on these on Khan Academy. I very, very much encourage you to watch it. These figurines look kind of large, but they're actually teeny tiny, and there's a bunch of them, and they're all with women. It's female figurines. So it's pre-Columbian society, so we're moving back to South America. There were multiple figurines, which were usually reflections of everyday life and a woman's role in the naturalistic world. Fertility and maternity, some of them and a lot of them you see with babies in their arms, very small in size. The multiple face is the ability to see now as well as communication in the spirit world. So basically the multifaceted views women have, as well as being able to see both into the physical world and the spiritual world. Boop. Terracotta fragments. So this was Melanesia. Inspired. So ancient Pacific seafaring people living now in Polynesia had zoomorphic, geometric, and sometimes anthropomorphic figures. Zoomorphic meaning animals, yeah. And sized into a pot before it's fired. So this was a pot is what they believed. But if you look closely, we have a face. So it's kind of an anthropomorphic, zoomorphic kind of. Is that a human? Is that a person? We don't really know. But then we also have a lot of pattern that's happening here. It's incised onto the pot before it's fired, then it's hardened, related to very modern Polynesian tattooing. So if you know of the culture, one of my favorite cultures, the Maori culture, super interesting. If you guys, which I'm sure with all of the AP and dual credit things you're taking, you're not going to have time to watch it. But if you ever watch a Maori haka, or like, haha, or if you watch, if you look at their tattooing, the more tattooing the individual has on them, the higher class they are. And to make them even more interesting, they were believed to be, they were at one point, cannibals. Aha. So again, Polynesian, usually when we talk Maori, we talk very much New Zealand area. So we know that we see modern tattooing in this, so this is a tradition that continues after that. This was a large pot which was used for cooking and storing food. So, I believe that is it for an overview. Yep, okay. Remember, I hope you took great notes. If you need to go back through anything, please go back through it. Hope you took great notes. I will see you guys in class. Thank you much, guys. See you later.